What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back. As always, thank you for joining me. My name is Paul Bretto. Today, we're here to discuss Packers pass rush, specifically their current search right now for the next defensive line coach and who they've had in for interviews and what you need to know about these candidates. But first, before we do all that, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brett. Find all my work, including the article version of what we're discussing here today over at ESPNLacrosse.com. And my Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for all your Wisconsin sports radio needs. So like I said, Packers' inconsistent pass rush after the season. A few days afterwards, the team announced that they moved on from defensive line coach Jason Rebrovich. Rebrovich had been with the team since the 2022 season. He came on at that time as the outside linebackers coach when they were in Joe Barry's 3-4 defense. So he specifically coached the outside linebackers, the edge rushers, Rashawn Gary, and that group. And then coming into this year, he, along with defensive backs coach Ryan Downard, were two of the position coaches from Joe Barry's staff who were brought over to be a part of Jeff Hafley's staff. Now in a 4-3 defense, Rebrovich's role went from being the outside linebackers coach, pass rush game coordinator as he was under Joe Barry, to the defensive line coach, the title that he held this season. And we've talked about it on here a number of times. You've all seen it with your eyes, just the lack of consistency from the Green Bay Packers pass rush, specifically their ability to generate steady pressure with a four-man rush. It was very all or nothing this season for this Packers pass rush. They did finish top 10 in sacks, but a lot of those sacks came in bunches against not very good teams. And in those games, those must-wins against the top opponents, we just didn't see the pass rush come through against the Eagles, the Vikings, the Lions. In those last three games against those teams, against the Eagles, Vikings, and Lions after the bye week, Jalen Hurts was pressured, and these are from Pro Football Focus, on 33% of his dropbacks. Sam Darnold on 31%, Jared Goff on 28%. For some context around those numbers, because what do they mean without context? Over the course of the regular season, Justin Herbert, the Chargers quarterback, was pressured on 33.8% of his dropbacks. So again, Hurts was 33% in the playoff game, Darnold 31%, and then Goff 28% when the Packers played them most recently. Justin Herbert was pressured for the season 33.8%, and that ranked 25th out of 42 eligible quarterbacks. So the Packers' ability to pressure the quarterbacks of those top-tier teams ranked in the bottom third compared to the rest of the season among all quarterbacks. So again, they weren't getting the job done against those top-tier teams. And when you're going up against offenses, quarterbacks of that caliber who have the skill position players that they do at receiver, tight end, running back, I mean, you're making things so much more difficult for your defense as a whole, but specifically your secondary. And we saw Jared Goff, we saw Sam Darnold specifically really pick apart those Packers defenses through the air. And again, there's a number of contributing factors to that, but a big part of the issue for the Packers was their inability to generate pressure. And again, when you can't do that, everything gets so much more difficult, regardless of who you have in the secondary. If you're asking your defensive backs to have to routinely defend for 3-4 seconds, I mean, that is a tall ask. And Matt LaFleur said, you got to win your one-on-ones. The Packers did not win their one-on-one matchups consistently enough. And like I said, they finished top 10 in sacks. They're around the middle of the NFL in overall pressure rate. But again, it was the consistency of that. It was very feast or famine. As we just highlighted, a lot of that production did come against struggling teams, not very good football teams. The pass rush wasn't a key factor in many of these games against the NFL's top teams, where obviously you're going to need that pass rush element. And I think one stat in particular really sums up the Packers pass rush is ESPN's pass rush win rate metric. Sounds simple, right? Your four-man front, how often are you winning your matchups? How often are you beating the offensive lineman in front of you? Packers as a unit ranked 26 in that category. I think, again, part of their success in the numbers, top 10 in sacks, middle of the NFL in pressure rate, was taking advantage of lesser opponents, and also credit to Jeff Hafley for dialing up blitzes, for the simulated pressures that he drew up to help manufacture some of those pressures. But when it came to the four-man front getting home, the four-man front generating pressure, that's where the issue lied. And a trickle-down effect of that, something we learned after the season that Matt LaFleur talked about, was we didn't necessarily see the full effect of the Jeff Hafley defense, of what was expected, of what we were expected to see from it. I mean, Matt LaFleur said after the season, he expected a lot more cover 3, 4-man fronts, but instead it was a lot of cover 2, a lot of blitzing, a lot of simulated pressures to help manufacture those pressures. So there's two ways you can look at that. In one respect, credit to Jeff Hafley, right, for his ability to adapt, to adjust, to find ways to make up for the lack of a steady pass rush while still fielding overall, again, a top 10 defensive unit in scoring. But on the other side of things, that's, again, it tells us the struggles that the Packers pass rush had, that Hafley's defensive scheme had to look quite different than what Matt LaFleur expected in order to make up for the lack of the pass rush's ability to get home. Now, the defensive front did an excellent job this season against the run. I think they finished the regular season third in yards per carry allowed, just as a unit, not just the front, but the defensive unit as a whole took a massive step forward in year one under Jeff Hafley against the run. But the name of the game in the NFL is getting after the quarterback, right? Like we talked about. You stop the run, you put the offense behind the sticks in predictable passing situations. Now the front can pin its ears back. Now the defensive front has the advantage to generate pressure. But if you can't capitalize on that, what you did in stopping the run and taking advantage of those long down and distance situations, because you can't get after the quarterback consistently, it takes away the effectiveness of having a good run defense. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Packers taking a step forward defensively in 2025, and they did take a big step forward in year one of Jeff Hafley this past year. They absolutely did. But in order to take another step, in order to reach their ceiling as a defense, starts up front. It starts with being better, more consistent as a pass rush unit, because when you're generating pressure, the job of every single defender on that field becomes much more easy. The job of the offense, the quarterback, becomes much more difficult. All right, next up, let's dive into the 3 candidates that the Packers have reportedly had in for interviews as of Thursday, January 23rd. This is what we know right now. And when it comes to these position coaches, I'm not gonna pretend that I have any sort of grand insight into who these candidates are. We can look at their numbers, their track record with their previous teams, and that's what we'll discuss with each of these candidates. But at the end of the day, it's the position coach's job to relay to their specific position group the overall message from the defensive coordinator, again, the one who's in charge of that unit, the overall scheme, the game plan for the week. So again, they're obviously a key component in that, but it's ultimately what the defensive coordinator wants to do. So again, from the outside perspective, trying to generate any sort of in-depth insight into these candidates, again, unless you're around these teams, can be really challenging. So again, there's a lot more to this than what we're going to discuss here today. And again, even the numbers that we get into. Anytime we're talking about stats, always important to mention, to remember, there's a lot of factors in play, right? It's a beautiful thing about football, all the nuance that goes into making any play successful or any of the issues that pop up into a play. So again, there's a lot that goes into this, but we'll go high level, kind of here's what you need to know about each of the 3 candidates that the Packers have had in for interviews so far. So first up, we'll start off with Casey Rogers. He's been with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers since 2019. Primarily working along the defensive front. He's had some other roles like run game coordinator, things like that, but he's worked with the defensive line during that span. In Tampa Bay, with Rodgers at the helm of that defensive line, have had a lot of success. This past season in 2024, Tampa Bay was 9th in pressure rate, 11th in yards per rush allowed, and during the final 9 games of the season, their run game did not allow a ball carrier to average more than 4 yards per carry against them. 2023 season, Tampa Bay was 7th in yards per rush. In 2021, they were 2nd in quarterback pressure rate, 7th in sacks, and 2nd in quarterback hits. 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm sure many remember them from the NFC Championship game against the Green Bay Packers, where that defensive front wreaked havoc on the Green Bay Packers in that game. Tampa generated that season in 2020 48 sacks. That was the 4th most in football. They were 3rd in pressure rate, 3rd in quarterback hits, and Casey Rogers that year won the Defensive Line Coach of the Year award. 2019, they had the top run defense in football in terms of yards per rush allowed and rushing yards per game surrendered. And Chris Canty, former player of Rodgers, said that one of the one of the teaching points for Rodgers to his defensive linemen was teaching the position from the offensive perspective, right? What's the offense trying to accomplish here? How are they going to block you? How are they going to try to open up running lanes or try to create more time in the pocket for the quarterback? So he tried to teach the defensive lineman the position from that perspective, because now when you can understand, again, as you're watching film of the opponent, really what they're trying to accomplish, it makes it, for lack of a better term, makes it easier for you to understand, all right, here's how they're going to attack me. Here's what I should be prepared for. Here's how I'm going to counter. Here's what I'm going to do to overcome that. So Chris Canty, again, former Buccaneers player, played under Casey Rodgers, said that was a really important aspect of Rodgers' teaching. And again, just the numbers speak for themselves, just the overall production that they got from the defensive front. Next up in interview candidates is Aaron Whitecotton, who's been with the New York Jets since the 2021 NFL season, which was just also happened to coincidentally be Robert Saleh's first season as head coach of the New York Jets. So I'm sure we can all piece together where Matt LaFleur got this recommendation from to interview for the defensive line position. But during those 2022-2023 seasons, New York Jets defensive front, just one of the most disruptive in football. In 2023, they were 7th in sacks, 4th in pressure rate. 2022 season, they were 3rd in pressure rate, 7th in sacks. Quinnen Williams was named a first-team All-Pro that season. And even in 2024, again, especially after Robert Saleh was fired by the Jets, their defense started to go backwards as the season went on. But I think one important note here in terms of Whitecotton's resume, so to speak, is the production jump we saw from second-year defensive end Will McDonald. Sacks, quarterback hits, his production took a huge jump from 2023, his rookie year, to 2024. And as we all know, as we look at the Packers roster, Lucas Van Ness, I think he was taken 2 picks before McDonald. I think McDonald was 15th overall in 2023 and Van Ness was 13th overall when the Packers took him. But we didn't see that kind of jump from Lucas Van Ness in his sophomore season. Again, McDonald, I think, went from around 5 sacks up towards 10. He went from somewhere around the 10 quarterback hit mark to in the low 20s. So big jumps in production in terms of getting after the quarterback from him. And one of the quotes I put in my article that, again, I wrote about these position coaches from Whitecotton is, again, we can all look at, and we're doing it right now, right? We can all look at the stat sheet and see the stats. We can see the numbers. We can see who's producing, who's not, all that stuff. But when he's evaluating, when he's coaching, when he's trying to get his players better, again, it's a full look at the entire play, because there's a lot of plays over the course of a football game that take place, especially in the trenches, that aren't going to show up on the stat sheet. You know, if you're a defensive lineman and you're taking on a double team that frees up the linebacker to fill a gap, to shoot a gap, to make a play on the ball carrier, you know, that's an important element, even though it's not going to be on the stat sheet, in making that tackle for loss in this example happen. So Whitecotton's point with that is, as he's coaching, as he's teaching, as he's going through film, is to make sure that those elements, those unselfish elements, right? Because you're not getting the recognition necessarily for everything that happens and making that play unfold and turn into a positive play, but highlighting it and making sure that that's an important and recognized part of the coaching, the teaching, all of those different aspects, again, just to maximize that entire defensive front as a whole. Last one, Eric Washington. He was the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator during this 2024 season. Before that, from 2020 to 2023, he was with the Buffalo Bills, again, working with their defensive line unit. This past season, Chicago Bears defense was 7th in pressure rate. 2023, his last season with the Bills, Buffalo was 6th in pressure rate, 4th in sacks, and 10th in tackles for loss that season. And really throughout his tenure with the Bills, that defensive front against the run, against the pass, been one of the more disruptive units out there. Now, as we look at these 3 candidates, I think the common thread that we can kind of take away from all of them is their experience. These are not, when Jason Rebrovich was hired, he was previously an assistant defensive line coach, I believe with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Packers aren't going that route this time. They are looking for someone who's experienced, someone who's established, someone who has a strong track record of teaching the position, getting results out of the position. And we can see from all three of these individuals that they have those, that those boxes are checked. So I think that's the big thing that really stands out for me here. And one other name I'll throw out there, this is not someone who's been reported to get an interview, but the assistant defensive line coach this year for the Packers was Vince Ogabasi, and he came over from Boston College with Jeff Hafley. He was Jeff Hafley's defensive line coach during his tenure there while he was the head coach of Boston College. So there's an existing relationship there. And again, even being around the team, I can't sit here and tell you whether, how Ogabasi is as a coach. I know from watching at practice, brings a ton of juice, brings a ton of energy to the practice field, to that Packers team. I think that's obviously an important element, especially for a position coach. But again, I think it's just worth noting because that relationship that he has with Jeff Hafley, but whether or not he's ready to take that next step into this role remains to be seen. And again, if we look at who the Packers have brought in to interview, that experience, that track record, that's still something that Ogabasi is developing, right, in his relatively young coaching career. So again, just a name I'll throw out there, but I think that's the big thing we can take away from these candidates right now, the experience and the success that they've had in their past. Because again, Packers are in a position, like Gruden said, they got it. It's championships, right? It's championships. That's what they're pursuing. That's what they're getting. They don't necessarily have time to go through a learning curve that may come with a younger coach. They need someone who can come in and get results right away. So there you have it, my friends. I appreciate you tuning in as always. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com and download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for all your Wisconsin sports radio needs. Till next time, friends, take care.